Hello, my friends. Today, the Russians continue their offensive, and we can say that activity is returning to previous levels. In the past 24 hours, 157 assaults have been recorded. This is a rather high number again, but we know at what cost Russia achieves any of its successes. Let's take a look at the current situation, starting with the border situation in the Kursk direction. There has been progress for both the Ukrainian forces and the Russians. The Russians have, of course, managed to advance significantly and are gradually pushing Ukrainian forces out of this territory. But our units are also moving forward with an advance of 2 kilometers and 800 meters as direct proof of that. However, potential targets like Lvov and possibly the Kursk nuclear power plant are still far off. Due to the slowdown in the progress, reaching these targets seems practically impossible today. The Russians are working hard to fortify their defensive lines, and now it won't be easy for the Ukrainian forces to advance without resistance. However, our units continue to operate FPV drones effectively in the Kulbaki area. A new video has emerged showing how the Ukrainian forces are preventing the Russians from moving through the settlement and destroying them. Even on their Russian soil, the Russians no longer feel safe. At the same time, in order not to lose the Glushkivsky district, the Russians continue building pontoon crossings and are actively moving across them. The Russians themselves are showing this openly, not hiding the information. In the Kharkiv direction, the situation remains stable for now. The Russians are not showing significant activity around the settlement of Liptsi, and the fighting for Vovchansk continues without pause. However, the Ukrainian forces are successfully repelling all attacks, and the front line remains unchanged as before. In the Kupyansk direction, unfortunately, the Russians are also gradually advancing. Besides their attacks near Sinkivka, they have managed to push forward in the Kolesnikivka area by 2 kilometers, leading to major difficulties on this front. The Russians are complicating Ukrainian logistics and are attempting to advance toward the water barrier and eventually Kupyansk, which is one of their main objectives. Additionally, they are applying pressure near Novoosinovo, but for the past day, all attacks have been repelled and there have been no changes in the situation. In the Svatove area, the situation around Berestova has also worsened due to the Russian advance. Some closed maps are already showing Berestova under Russian control. However, we won't jump to conclusions just yet and will wait for official information. Regardless, it's clear that the situation is deteriorating here. The Russians continue their attacks on Lozova, and fighting is ongoing southward near Druzhelyubivka, Grekivka, and in the assault on Makiyivka. The Russians have made some gains in the fields around Makiyivka, though they are not significant. The battles are still ongoing. In the Kreminna direction, the front line has seen no significant changes for a long time. However, yesterday, Ukrainian forces achieved success near Torske. Unfortunately, the Russians also managed to advance in the Serebryanka forest. So it can be said that there is a partial exchange of territories and the fighting continues. In the Siversk direction, the Russians continue their attacks near Bilohorivka as well as assaults on Ivanodaryivka and Pereizne. However, over the past day, there have been no changes to the front line. In the Chasiv Yar direction, the situation has become more concerning due to Russian advances, leading some to sound alarms. pro-Russian sources are claiming that this marks the end and that Chasiv Yar is encircled, but this isn't true. There is still a long way to go before the encirclement. While the situation has indeed become more complicated, the most the Russians can achieve in the near future is the full capture of Klishchiivka and a slight advance through the fields to even out the front line. Afterward, they'll have to stretch their flanks again, which will require significant resources. So the fighting continues, and Ukrainian forces are steadily eliminating the Russians despite their small successes. So on this part of the front, there is no major collapse and certainly no large-scale breakthrough. In the Toretsk direction, the Russians are also making some progress, but only in small increments of a few hundred meters. There are no major breakthroughs here. They are attempting to move closer to Shcherbinivka and are stretching the front line precariously, likely feeling confident due to their numerical advantage, which prompts them to take risks. Continuous assaults are ongoing on Nelipivka, the outskirts of Toretsk, and fighting persists in the area around Dachne. In the Pokrovsk direction, Russian forces continue to shell the cities of Mirnograd and Pokrovsk, causing significant destruction to these two large urban centers. This is happening because Russian troops have advanced close enough for the artillery to reach. However, Ukrainian forces have managed to stop them on the outskirts, and as of now, there have been no changes to the front line, though the assaults continue daily. South of this area, the Russians have had more success, advancing 1 kilometer and 700 meters closer to the village of Tsukurene, where fighting continues. Additionally, the Russians are trying to push forward near Zhelanne Pershe, but the Ukrainian forces are doing everything they can to hold the defense. Overall, Russian activity in the entire Pokrovsk direction is gradually increasing. In the last 24 hours, there have been reports of 40 assaults. The Russians are slowly pulling in reserves and attempting to advance further. However, in Ukrainsk, they've already raised their flags and published videos claiming that the city is under their control. Unfortunately, this indicates that the situation is no longer under the control of Ukrainian forces and they've had to retreat from the area. In the Kurakhove direction, the Russians continue their assaults on Georgievka, the village of Kostiantynivka and Katerinivka. No changes have been reported in the last 24 hours, but the activity remains high despite Ukrainian forces successfully eliminating another group of Russians at a training ground near Donetsk. Unfortunately, the destruction of even hundreds of Russians doesn't significantly alter the situation, as there are tens of thousands of Russian troops concentrated in each direction, keeping the overall situation extremely tense. In the Vuhledar direction, Russian forces are also maintaining their high level of activity. They are attempting to advance further near the village of Vodene, and the assaults toward Vuhledar continue. However, no changes to the front line have been reported in the last day. In the Zaporizhzhia direction, the Russians are still trying to advance near Robotine. However, the situation remains stable, with Ukrainian forces repelling all attacks and the front line remains unchanged. In the Kherson direction, shelling of Kherson continues, along with attempts by Russian forces to break through to the islands near Hola Pristan. Despite these efforts, the Russians have had no success and the front line remains the same. Overall, they continue launching costly frontal assaults as they rush to capture as much territory as possible ahead of potential negotiations. It's highly likely that talks will occur soon, as the US has already stated that they are aware of elements of Zelensky's victory plan. US State Department spokesperson Miller said the US has been informed about elements of the victory plan. As President Zelensky has said, he looks forward to presenting that plan in detail in the coming days or weeks. We'll wait before offering any kind of further conclusions. So we'll see what results come from this. Meanwhile, foreign outlets continue reporting that a ceasefire might be possible by 2025. Bloomberg reports that Ukraine's allies are considering a ceasefire in Ukraine by 2025. Officials said that the decision on negotiations will be made solely by Kyiv and no pressure is being applied on Zelensky. Politically, it would be difficult for the president to sign an agreement that involves territorial concessions. Meanwhile, former US Secretary of State under Trump is helping with the presidential campaign and claimed that only Trump can stop Putin.
Працював з президентом Трампом 4 роки. І за цей час Володимир Путін не забрав жодного дюйма української землі. Згадайте, що він захопив 5-ту частину України, включно з Кримом, за часів президентства Обами. Адміністрація Трампа надала Україні оборонні системи ще до війни, що стримувало Володимира Путіна. Проте всього за кілька місяців після відходу Трампа з посади Путін знову почав вбивати українців і захоплювати нові території. Коли намагаєшся передбачити, що Путін зробить у випадку президентства Трампа, можна очікувати, що модель стримування, яку ми вибудували, буде значно впливовішою для нього, ніж слабкість, яку він бачив за президентства Обами і Байдена. Це завдало значної шкоди не лише Україні, яка втратила тисячі життів, але й усьому європейському континенту та Сполученим Штатам Америки.
Як ви ставитеся до того, що він каже, треба розмовляти з Путіним? Ви можете уявити, що він буде подавати руку міжнародному злочинцю і вбивці українських дітей?
Президент Трамп і я зустрічалися з багатьма людьми, які вбивали американців. Я розмовляв із талібами, які вбили моїх друзів. Я зустрічався з Кімом, який нещодавно позбавив життя американського громадянина, утримуючи його в заручниках у Північній Кореї, і який знищив десятки тисяч своїх співвітчизників. Так, часто доводиться говорити з поганими людьми, адже саме вони стають джерелом найбільших бід. Тому нерідко доводиться мати справу з найгіршими злочинцями у світі. Я багато часу провів із Сі Цзіньпіном, який винен у смерті 10 мільйонів людей через вірус, що поширився з лабораторії в Ухані. Це просто робота.
We'll see how things develop as there are 48 days left until the US election. Meanwhile, Lukashenko continues to believe someone will attack him.
Американцы указали Киеву, если сложатся обстоятельства, атаковать нашу инфраструктуру по южной границе. Причина – российские беспилотники летают над территорией, рядом с территорией Беларуси. И я хочу спросить у американцев, вы мира хотите, мирных переговоров или эскалации ситуации? Я не зря это спрашиваю, потому что они в последнее время очень часто намекали нам о переговорах. И даже выдвинули условия к этим переговорам. Мы согласились. А как тогда это понимать? Но я хочу просто в связи с этим предупредить наших противников, наших соперников и тех, кто не понимает еще. Не надо этого делать. Это пойдет не на пользу не только региону Европы, но и всей планете. Нападение на Беларусь, запомните это, Третья мировая война.
The most notable thing is that neither the US nor NATO even mentioned Lukashenko, but he's doing everything possible to keep himself relevant and make Belarusians believe that someone is paying attention to him, which in reality is far from true. And that's all from me. So please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on all the latest news. Thank you for watching and see you next time. Bye bye.